DM073 Gaming is brought to you by Happy Little Hug Factory. If you're interested in getting pre-orders of the next set, or if you have cards that you're looking to pick up singles or looking to sell some cards, Happy Little Hug Factory is the place to go. Check the links down in the description for their websites, as well as their buy list for Force of Will and for other card games. Thanks so much, enjoy the video.
Hey there guys, DM073 here, bringing you a feature match for the week. This is New Frontiers. I am playing a green, white, red Aimul clone combo style list that was sent to me by my friend Brandan Bremont. And my buddy Josh is playing a black, white, zero list. So it's kind of a kill everything you play kind of zero list. It's definitely not a Death and Taxes style, and it is just green, just black, white. So kind of the premise behind the Aimul list is we use Aimul's untap effect to kind of manipulate ramp a little bit with Sacred Elves, as well as manipulate things like being able to untap Phaley to make some pretty interesting things happen. So I am going to be on the play here, and so we'll just have to see how it goes. Keep in mind that it's the nature of a combo deck. You know, sometimes going up against a deck that is pretty heavily removable. So walking into this matchup, there's a very potential that it could go Josh's way, right? If he can kind of stay ahead of me playing my combo pieces by killing off the important pieces, whereas mine is just to try to get to my combo as fast as possible so that I can kind of lock Josh out of being able to kill everything he needs to be able to kill. And with that, we are off to the races. So let's see how it goes. So you see my opening hand there, I have that Faria summon. I'm not quite entirely sure what Josh's list is up the top, so I'm going to go ahead and keep that True Blade while I can, just in case there's an Abdul, and then I actually do decide to ship away the other card as well. So call for stone, hit a Summer's Breeze. One of my friends was borrowing my Summer's Breeze for the day, and so I had to kind of turn some cards backwards, so I apologize. That is the countdown stone that produces red or spends a counter to produce green. Josh is going to go ahead and call stone. Unfortunately, I didn't have a turn one. He is debating whether or not he wants to pay that 3 on the first turn. He says, no, I don't really have a turn 1 play, really, so I'm not going to pay the 3. I'm just going to take it. Go to my turn, get a Blasting Waves, calling for stone there. Pass the turn there, unfortunately. Hits his Shadowy Light Stone. Decides to use all 3 of his available will with the Energized Coin to play Gil Lapis. It's Usurper Maddening Power, gets to go into his deck, grab a 1-drop white or black spell. This card is very good in this format. It's gotten a lot better, I think, in this format. There's a lot of really strong 1-drop black and white spells, things like Flourishing Hope, Thought Control, there's Final Battle, lots of different really strong options for this guy. While he didn't always have great options in white, things also like Miscalculation or Separation of Fates just gave him a lot better choices in terms of what he's able to grab. Drawing per turn, hit the Memory of Reincarnation, decide to pay the 3, and I make a little bit of a misplay here. So like if I'm thinking about, typically Usurper Maddening Power would be used to grab Heteroclite Excalibur, but he chose not to. He grabbed Thought Control instead, which should have signaled me to the fact that he probably has a Heteroclite in his hand. But this turn I go ahead and decide to play the Phaley, thinking that I don't want it to get Thought Controlled out of my hand on his turn. And I don't really think about the fact that there's most likely some kind of removal in his hand anyway. He does. I'm not really necessarily worried about Flourishing Hope or anything like that, because he'd have to kind of like tap out and doesn't really have the will to be able to deal with it that way. Like he has to have the Heteroclite. And so there's kind of my misplay here. So now against RFG, he doesn't have to take any life point damage because of the Gil. And can just kind of stay ahead of me, and he gets the Thought Control, but I'm going to go ahead and Severing it because I at least want to keep the other cards in my hand safe for right now. And then he's going to play a Venus, who will get to draw him a card. He doesn't play a lot of Historicals, and then he's going to swing at me for 6, so I'll go down to 31. Draw for turn, call stone. Finally see a light source, which is pretty helpful for that if I see like a Kaki's Moonbeam Butterfly to be able to grab some other stuff. I'm going to play a Sacred Elf. Still have that Faria summon, as you can see there. So I can try to go grab a Phaley, during his turn. Draw for turn and recover. Calls for stone. Hits a Heaven's Rift. It's gonna go ahead and try to swing. Attempts to move into combat. I'm gonna go ahead and flash in a Lorite, just because of the fact that I want to try to protect my Sacred Elf. As much as possible. That will ramp is super important. He's trying to attack my Sacred Elf with Gil Usurper. He attempts to remove it from the game. I'll use Fair Spell to try to prevent the Zero's magic light from removing my Lorite. Talking about how the chase is interacting with everything. Seeing about if he wants to use that other Zero's magic light to, in response to the Fair spell. Which I think, ultimately wouldn't be super ideal for me, but it would, because it'd lose my Sacred Elf. But it also would, it make him use 2 removal sources just on 1 creature. And then after all that resolves, what I'm going to do is I'm going to double produce green with Sacred Elf. And the way I do that is tap it, produce green, use Aimul to recover it, and then tap it to produce again. Swings for 2. I'll go ahead and cast Faria Summon, which lets me recover a stone. Get to go into my deck and grab a creature. I could grab Melfi here. Probably would be better, but at the same time, I really just want to try to get my combo started again. So I am going to go ahead and grab the Phaley off of it. I think about going to go grab knowing that I have the floating green, I'm like, oh, I'll grab Melfi. But I instead decide to, grab the Phaley, just so I can try to establish a combo next turn and kind of start to get back in the game. I haven't taken a ton of life point damage, right? So it's not terribly too... it's not too terrible that I have lost kind of my early game creatures. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the Recovered Stone from Faria Summon with Torrenting to try to cast the True Blade. And then he responds to that by protecting it with a Flourishing Hope, and I'll take 2 damage. So now I'm in a little bit worse shape because now he has access to Burgeoning Despair, which means that because I've kept my creature count so low, unfortunately, because my combos just hasn't been successful in going off right now, Burgeoning Despair is actually really good because it sets, if I try to if I don't put enough stuff on board with Phaley, or like will to protect Phaley, or will to kind of make it so that Phaley can make some clones pretty quick, Burgeoning Despair can just make it so I have to sack Phaley, and then I'm right back to where I started. So I'm going to play this Rachel, and the purpose of the Rachel here is to kind of top deck him, set him up so I have a little bit maybe more stability in terms of getting myself some time. The other thing about Rachel is great is because Rachel just helps me get to look for stuff when it dies. So I'm trying to set up the card that will impact him. Rather than discard all 3, I'm going to try to set up the card that I think will help him the least. So I know what his draw is. I kind of know that information. This is kind of the way that this deck uses Rachel, is to kind of set up your opponent's draws. And it is one of the kind of 4 combo options that the deck has once it gets the Phaley onto the field. So he draws that card, goes to recover. I do have the Melfi in my hand, which feels pretty good, because the whole idea would be to like flash in Melfi at the end of his turn, and the next turn play the Phaley, or during my turn play the Phaley, and kind of start to go off from there, to be able to start doing a lot of really cool clone shenanigans and kind of get ahead of the Burgeoning Despair and like cloning Rachel's multiple times and doing a lot of really cool stuff. So he calls for that stone. Pays 3. And he had in his hand another Gil Usurper, which is really unfortunate, because I don't have a Severing Winds to kind of answer whatever he tries to play here. And he knows I have a Phaley. So like grabbing a Thought Control would be really good here, because he could just rip Phaley out of my hand, and then I'm just kind of like out of luck. So just have the Thought Control. Plays the Thought Control, so I'm gonna have to lose the Phaley. Obviously, it's the clear choice for him, is to grab the Phaley because it's what sets up the weird comboness. So he goes to swing at me with Gil, and I make a little bit of a misplay here. Not too bad, but like, it's for the sake of being able to draw a card. He casts, so when the Rachel dies, I get to go look into my deck, so I can go grab a Phaley to just kind of start establishing a better combo here. He casts Flourishing Hope on it so that he doesn't lose his Gil. He doesn't really need to, because his Gil's getting a stat pump from having a second Gil, because they're both Will of Despair creatures. But I'm gonna go ahead and flash in Melfi, attempt to block, kill that Venus finally. He's all tapped out on my turn. Call for stone. So the card I grabbed off of the Rachel at that point. I could have grabbed the Phaley. I could have grabbed also could have grabbed a Blazer, which probably would have been pretty helpful in this situation, to be able to like peek at his hand and rip out a card that's important. Because I have Darkness Will, thanks to Melfi, is I grabbed a Jupiter. Part of the reason why you can do that, I think, is what I grabbed. So what I could do here, it's a little interesting of a combo. I could like play, when he tries to go like attack the Melfi, I could like float Green Will and play Jupiter using that Green Will and bounce Melfi back to my hand. And then block with Jupiter. And then what I can do from there is, if he tries to swing into Jupiter again with and like draw a card, right? That's also helpful. If he tries to attack the Jupiter, then I still have enough two will left over to be able to play the Melfi and then protect the Jupiter, thus also killing that second Galapis. So he's gonna play that Venus, flip into 0, and then he chooses not to attack. He doesn't really necessarily need to. He's pretty safe, pretty comfortable. Swings in, and go ahead and try to block with the, he does decide to go ahead and try to swing to try to kill the Melfi. I'm going to go ahead and block with the low right. I'll flash in the Jupiter here to try to draw a card, and then I'm going to bounce, I believe I'm going to bounce a Resonator. bounce or tap it, I think, so he can't swing and he doesn't really have a blocker wall. So draw a card and tap the Jupiter. And then part of me is like, well, I can block with the Jupiter, but he might be able to remove it. So this is a little bit of, again, it's a little bit of a misplay on my part here. I got a little bit too ahead of myself knowing what Zero has and the fact that I didn't look at his hand. I didn't try to grab a Blazer to protect itself. So I'm like, I guess, yeah, you've killed my Jupiter. Rather than at least forcing him to have the card. With no severing in hand, it felt just a little bit off to try to play it. And then he actually just has the removal spell for the Jupiter anyway. So unfortunate, just all around, that I was just in a really bad spot. So staring down all these creatures, looking at my hand, I'm like, well, I guess the real only thing I can do is do Judgment, I guess, because I did have 2 white sources at this point. So look at the top 3 creatures, hopefully see something. I see a Rachel, which is at least something to put out onto the field and lets me draw into a different card. I don't have Flying. I do have Drain. I don't have Imperishable. The whole idea is to kind of like use Aimul to stall. This deck rarely ever flips Aimul over, simply because we want to make use of her untap effect more than we want to make use of anything else. But in my mind, I'm like, I just need to start drawing cards. So I need to see a creature, and for only 2 will, I can potentially hit a Phaley, at which point in time I could like flash in a Melfi, and then immediately clone it or do lots of other kind of silly things to try to get back ahead. So he drew another Lapis, Usurper, and Maddening Power there. So again, this is what I'm talking about. This is just a case of a combo deck, a creature-based combo deck, right? That, like, if it can't stick the combo pieces, if it can't protect them against a deck with so much heavy removal and so many different elements, it's going to struggle, right? Because we need my creatures' combo pieces to survive in order to be able to go off. And with black-white, there are a lot of removal options. Either discard from the hand, search consistency with Usurper, Maddening Power. I flash in a low right to cancel it. Does a lot of work there. He's got Miscalculation. He's got Zero's Magic Light. He's got all kinds of good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and take the 7 damage from that, or the 8 damage from that, go down to 21. Take another 8 damage. Go down to 13. Debating whether or not he wants to swing 0, but there's no point in him swinging 0. So I'll draw for turn. Move to recovery. I think I drew a Severing Winds at that point in time, which I'm just staring down so much stuff that I can't really deal with it. So many things on his field have precision. 4 of his creatures on the field have precision, and 3 of them are 8/8s, and one of them is an 11/11 that can't take damage. So I do something a little bit silly here. I try to swing at him in the face, assuming that he's going to try to block with the Gil Lapis that's recovered. Then I'm like, okay, cool, I'll draw a card, and I'll kind of start going forward from there. He just takes the damage, 33, and at that point I go, I guess I'm going to call for Stone randomly, and then I look at my hand and I go, wait a minute, that's pointless. I'm just going to go ahead and scoop the game. There's nothing really I can do. So I say, let's just go ahead and move on to the second game. Hand of Melfi and Severing Winds, nothing I'm going to do. So we go into game 2. Still on the play, hopefully this time that I can kind of stay ahead of the curve. I can hopefully try to grab the turn 1 Sacred Elf with some protection for it and land into like the early game Phaley to try to start cloning. The whole kind of idea of the deck is you try to stick a Melfi on turn 1.5, so your opponent's turn 1, by using the untap trick with a Sacred Elf. And then you can kind of play Phaley and protect it starting at turn 2 forward, again, because of the untap effect. So we'll just kind of have to see what happens. Off to a strong start with the turn 1 Sacred Elf. He hits that turn 1 Heaven's Rift, plays a Venus. I say that's fine. I don't really have any concern about that. You can draw a card. I don't have anything. I don't have the turn 1.5 Melfi, unfortunately, but I do have the turn 2. Seeing that I have Sacred Elf or Severing Winds and a Ferris spell in hand, I do have the turn 2 Phaley. So what I can do here is, it looks like I'm tapped out, right? But on his turn, I can untap Sacred Elf with Aimul to be able to make use of the Ferris spell. So I can actually bait out a kill spell and then punish it pretty hard, because I'll also have Severing Winds in hand if he tries to follow it up with anything. And since I'm not really planning on cloning anything this turn, if he tries to swing with Jupiter, he can just get punished by me blocking with Phaley. Calls for stone. Attempts to play Forbidden Arts, the black-white stoning to death. I'm going to use Aimul to attempt to recover my Sacred Elf and cast the Fairer spell to cancel it. So then that's one kill spell essentially out of the way. Super helpful. I'm pretty protected there, even if he responds to me trying to untap a Sacred Elf by casting something else, because then I can just cast the Severing Winds and then he's completely tapped out. And since he's not playing any green in the deck, it's very unlikely that he's actually playing any Severing Winds. So going into my turn, hit that Magic Stone of Reincarnation, pay the 30 to go down to 37. I don't necessarily really need to worry right now, and again, I'm leaving up that will for a potential hard cast of Severing Winds if necessary. But I also have Melfi in my hand too, so I can flash that in at end of turn and go to a ridiculously large amount of will. Josh at this point not really having a ton of potential options. Calls for stone. It's an Alhamat stone, decides to pay the 3, goes down to 37. Pays 1 and casts the Nameless Mist. I'm like, well, that's a little unfortunate, but I think I have to kind of let that resolve, right? So he's obviously probably going to take the Severing Winds so that he can make a follow-up play, but I still have the Kaguya's Moonbeam. My other option would be to hard cast to cancel, but then I'm just paying 1 will for him to do something anyway, and I lose the option to be able to play Melfi. Kaguya's Moonbeam Butterfly next turn, having the Melfi in hand, I can easily cast Kaguya's Moonbeam, or I can cast the Blazer and start kind of cloning them and picking his hand apart. So I'm just kind of waiting a little bit longer to see if I can successfully get the combo to kind of go off. He's going to go ahead and pay 3, play that Guild to try to search for a card. I'm really not concerned about that at that point because he is tapped out, so even if he's trying to get something like a Final Battle or something else like that, I can just rip it out of his hand. He's going to grab the Heteroclite, but again, he's tapped out, so I'm not concerned about that at this point. So shuffling up here. At the end of turn, so pardon the tapping of this. Josh is a real sport and lets me kind of shift how I've kind of paid for things here to give the absolute best example. So what happens with Phaley is Phaley says you can pay 1 red and tap to create a clone of target resonator you control. At the next end of turn, that resonator, that token dies. So if you do the Phaley effect after the beginning of the end phase, it lasts until the next end of turn, which means my turn. So what I did there is I flash in Melfi, wait until the end of the turn, then that trigger passes. I clone Melfi to create a Melfi clone, recover Feli with Aimul, clone Melfi again. So I go into my turn with actually 3 Melfis, and suddenly I'm sitting at turn 4 with a grand total of 8 will. And I can use those 2 Melfis freely because they're just going to die at the end of the turn, so might as well make use of them. I'm going to play Blazer. Main reason I'm doing that is because next turn I can clone into 2 more Blazers and just start ripping his hand apart if I need to. Take the Heteroclad Excalibur, see there's no real extra kill spells there. At this point in time, Flourishing Hope and Burgeoning Despair mean nothing to me because I have Sacred Elf, I have Melfi, I can use Fadely to make a bajillion clones, so I can stay way ahead of having to sacrifice creatures. And then at the end of the turn, my 2 Melfi clones just die. So this is kind of how that clone combo starts to work. I've got some protection, I'm able to look at his hand, I can do things before he recovers, and I'm actually going to do that. So before he recovers even, but after he's drawn, I'm going to clone Blazer, take a look and say, hey, did you draw anything that I care about? You tapped out, so I don't have to worry about instant speed stuff, but did you play anything that I necessarily care about? And looking in his hand, I actually... like I said, those Flourishing Hopes don't really mean anything to me. Grim doesn't super mean anything to me because it doesn't have swiftness. The Altar really means nothing to me because I don't plan on killing him his stuff. So I actually want to keep him locked in that hand. So I'm going to take the Venus. Because at this point in time I have perfect knowledge, nothing in his hand can really answer anything I possibly have. I still have the option to be able to clone another Blazer if I needed to. I can stop the attack from the Gil Lapis with the Blazer clone. I'm just completely safe, so I'm just going to go ahead and keep that hand exactly where I want it to be. And that's kind of what this deck looks to do. It says I'm going to perfectly answer, set up your hand so that you can't possibly do anything, and then continue to just make unlimited clones, and just get way, way ahead. So Blazer has, hexproof protection, which is great, and then he can also just remove a creature that's attacking from combat if he battles it. So if he tries to swing on my Feli for some reason, I can just kind of do anything I want there, remove it from combat with the clone, and then I don't have to worry about him potentially drawing a card off the altar. Lots of cool stuff. Even if he moves into combat, I can just recover the Feli beforehand. He has precision, so that's not a terribly big deal, but that Gil Lapis can't even successfully kill my Feli because our huge defense with 800 defense. So he's just going to play the Grim, and then say, okay, I'm done. The end of the turn trigger, again, I'm going to use Aimul to recover Feli, and then in that end of the turn sequence, I'm going to go ahead and actually clone Melfi. And the reason why I'm cloning Melfi here is because I have the Kage's Moonbeam Butterfly, and I want to make use of the High Will without having to tap out on my turn. I don't really necessarily need to make another Blazer quite yet. I can make 2 during his turn if I need to. And in my mind, if I can go grab something like a Jupiter, I'm just in a much better shape. Call for Stone. So at this point in time, I'm on turn 5 and sitting at 9 will, 8 will. I'll use the Blazer here. The only real threat right now for me is this Grim. He tries to block and then use Flourishing Hope on the Venus. So my response to that is to use my 2, and because I actually drew into it, I don't have to Kage's Moonbeam Butterfly it. I'm going to go ahead and play the Jupiter. So the Jupiter, what it's going to do is I'm going to bounce the Venus back to his hand because I don't really care, and then untap the Blazer. So I can attack again if I want to. And then Blazer's still going at the Grim. Oh no, I decided to draw a card instead. And I don't know why my Jupiter's tapped there. I actually catch it here in just a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a card, get some more advantage, and then put the Venus back in his hand. The blocker's been removed. His Flourishing Hope is going to resolve. I don't think he actually flips it here, although he should. Blazer gets to go through, and then with it being a 9/9 with precision, kills the Grim, so then my Feli is perfectly safe. Now, at this point in time, I have 2 of the massive kind of end game pieces for this deck. With Blazer to steal his hand and Jupiter to cancel anything he plays, as well as being able to recover Feli, as well as being able to bounce creatures. At this point in time, I'm pretty much safe. I have a guaranteed at least if I was to use Aimul to untap Phaley and save one mode of Jupiter to untap Phaley, sorry, use Aimul to untap Melfi, I could make 3 Jupiters during the course of his turn. So essentially 3 1-will cancel spell, put a 10-12 clones at instant speed is very, very strong. So Josh is recognizing his flourishing hopes aren't really doing him anything. He doesn't have enough will to play that Blazer unless he calls for stone. His spells are practically useless with me being able to instant speed make Jupiters. So if he has a final battle or a thought control or something, it's probably just going to get canceled. He does cast the thought control here. And I'm like, I'm not sure if I really care. So you know what? That's okay. You can actually just take it. I'm going to save the Severing Winds for later. You can take my Melfi. I'm okay with it. Could have easily just flashed in the Melfi, so he had to take Kaguya's Moonbeam Butterfly, but I figure in this case I'm saving will, so don't really need the Melfi right now either. Plays 1, plays the Altar because he might as well. Can't cancel it. That's the only card that I couldn't really affect in his, and then he passes to me. And then during the end phase of his turn, use Phaley to attempt to clone Jupiter. Jupiter going to pick modes to untap Melfi and draw a card. I'm going to use Aimul to attempt to untap Phaley. He says, sure, that's fine. Use the Melfi to then clone Jupiter with modes to draw a card and untap Phaley. And then use my last will to clone Jupiter with modes to draw a card, and I think I bounced the Jupiter back to his hand. No, I bounced the Gil Lapis back to his hand, because again, I don't really care about spells at this point. So I have 4 Jupiters going into his turn because I cast them during the end phase, so that's lethal damage right there, just with those 4. That's all I really need. I also have the Blazer to be able to push damage through. All of them can attack because those creatures came into play on his turn. Call for Stone, hit another Summer Breeze. And the hand that I drew into, I think, is like double Lowrite, double Severing Winds, double Faerie Spell, or something silly like that. So I'm like a completely safe hand. Plus, I still has Phaley to be able to instant speed clone and get whatever I need. So I'll swing in with the first Jupiter. He says fine. Swing in with the second Jupiter. He says fine. Swing in with the third Jupiter. He's like, I'm not sure what I want to do there. I'll block with the Venus, I guess. Seeing how much damage I still have on board with having another Jupiter and a Blazer and all these cancel spells in my hand, I'm like, sure, that's fine. You got it. Okay. He's going to pay 1 to try to draw a card, hopefully seeing like a Zero's Magic Light or something. I'll swing in with the other Jupiter. It takes him down to 7. And then I'll swing in with the Blazer, and he just says, yeah, I don't really have anything. And my hand was Lowrite, Melfi, Severing, Lowrite, Faerie Spell. So completely protected from pretty much anything he wanted to do. So, and then we move into game 3. So game 3, I'm going to be on the draw for the first time. Have that extra will can be pretty helpful. Having the white off the top is pretty efficient, as well as being able to potentially be black if I need to play a Blazer and can't find a Melfi. It helps me with Kaguya's Moonbeam Butterfly and Faria Summon to be consistent in the deck. So as you can see, again, when I stayed ahead of the removal spells, when I landed those combo pieces, eventually it got to this point where he just couldn't play, because anything he was going to try to play for only 1 will, I was going to stick a body on board that was also going to answer whatever he needed. And if you're talking about advantage, that's just a crazy huge amount of advantage. And when Jupiter hits the board, final battle pretty much just becomes worthless if there's a Phaley too. You can invest as much life into it as you want, but Phaley is just Jupiter's just going to cancel it for 1. Sees that stone. His is actually a shadowy light. He doesn't, unfortunately, Josh doesn't own enough, so it's a black-white, just a shadowy light. I'll play that turn 1 Sacred Elf after hitting my Summer's Breeze. I know this is the feature match of incorrect proxy stones. I have to apologize. Hope you guys can forgive us for that. Calls for stone, hits a shadowy light here. See, he has double Heteroclite Excalibur. Decides to pay 1 to try to kill the Sacred Elf. I'll float the green, recover, float the green again. He says that's fine. He goes down to 35. That Sacred Elf should be removed, but I have no way to recur my graveyard, so it's not super relevant in the sense, but it should be removed from the game. He says I'll pass the turn. In the end phase, I do have the Melfi to be able to make use of those 2 will. So I just turned one, ramp card into another. Recover, call for a stone. Hitting a Blasting Waves here. Deciding whether or not I want to play Phaley this turn. I say, nah, I'm just going to be safe here. I'm going to play the Sacred Elf. Kind of take one more turn to really set up. During the end of his turn, he's going to cast Flourishing Hope on my side. Now, you could think I should cancel this, but I have the Ferris spell up because I have the Ferris spell in my hand. But my thought process is if he decides to spend an entire turn on a Burgeoning Despair, tapping out to do it, I can just spend 1 will with a Ferris spell and cancel it, and just get a massive, essentially a free turn. And that's unfortunately exactly what Josh tries to do. He tries to spend his whole turn using that Burgeoning Despair, which is probably a smart call if he lets me wait too long, and he keeps my ramp down. Then if he lets me keep my ramp, then I just blow way far ahead of him. But it gives me essentially that free turn, unfortunately, and I'm able to play the Ferris spell, and then I use Aimul to actually untap, and then flash in another Melfi at the end of turn. So here I am going into turn 3, and I'm potentially at 7 will. At that point in time, I can use Kaguya's Moonbeam Butterfly with my Energized Coin. And my thought process is I could grab a Phaley, or I am going to go grab a Phaley here. So I can start cloning stuff. I have protection. I've got 3 will up. Potential for a 4th, and I have a Severing Winds in hand. So again, if he tries to have to play a Heteroclite, I can just go ahead and hard removal that and hope he doesn't have a second one. If he tries to play a Gil Lapis and search for one, then I have Severing Winds to be able to back it up. I just have lots of different options here. And if he doesn't have a kill spell for any reason, then as you saw before, I can just go into being, at this point, having 2 extra Melfi clones. So I'd go into that next turn with like 10 will on turn 4. And be able to play some pretty ridiculously huge things. He did draw into that final battle. So he actually makes an interesting play here. He's going to pay 16 life and 1 will to try to deal -8/-8 to the board. He wants to clear off everything. He wants to get rid of Phaley's and he wants to get rid of Melfi. So it goes down to 19 to do it. So doing a lot of my work for me. And then I am actually going to go ahead and hardcast the Severing just to stop it. He does have the Heteroclite in his hand, and so he says, you know what, I have to get that Phaley off the board. I've only got 1 card in my hand. It's probably pretty safe. I'll take the 500 additional damage, and I'll just get rid of the Phaley. Totally fair. Leaves me still with a lot of will, but at the same time, he had to do what he has to do, because if he left me too much longer, my Phaley was going to get out of control. Plays the Shade to kind of wrap up his turn. Let's go to my turn. Thinks about whether or not he wants to let me do something in recovery. Says, yeah, I'll go ahead and shoot one of the Melfis, go back up to 2,000 life. Go to recover on my turn. Hit another Summer's Breeze here. With him only having 3 cards in his hand and being tapped out right now, I decided to think I should probably play the safer route, which is to use Kage's Moonbeam Butterfly to go grab a 4-drop, and that 4-drop being Blazer, so I can start getting that extra information from his hand and be protected from the removal spell. if there is one potentially. So Blazer's coming in, and especially since he's already used Final Battle, if he wants to Final Battle his way outside of dealing with Blazer, then he has to pay 1800 life or a ton of will to do it. And in this case, I get rid of the Gil Lapis, Usurper Maddening Power. I leave him with the Forbidden Arts, but the Forbidden Arts, I can just cancel it with Blazer if he chooses to try to kill it. So, got rid of his consistency man, kept him low on cards, and again, put myself just in a position where even with fewer cards, I have the knowledge of what Josh has, so I can stay kind of ahead of the curve. Calls for Stone, hits another Shadowy Light here. Phase 1 to play Venus, which he top decked, so he gets to draw into another card. Plays Thought Control, and I say, you know what, in response, I'll go ahead and recover my Melfi and then flash into Melfi. So now his Thought Control gets to look at an empty hand. And then he pays 3 to play the Grim, and passes the turn to me. So draw for turn. Call for Stone. His second white source. That second white source is pretty helpful because now I can, or the white source is helpful because now I only need one white source to be able to do Judgment, and I can get that with Melfi. Play the Phaley. I'm going to try to kill the Grim because it's the only threat to my Phaley at this point. It's going to throw the Venus underneath it. Draws for turn, and then I say, I know you're going to try to flip here, so before you can recover, let's go ahead and make a Blazer clone. Look at your hand. It's 2 of those spells. I'll take one. We'll go ahead and recover, make another Blazer clone just right now, and just kill him. Get rid of your entire hand after he's drawn. So now all he has is Grim and 0. So it's a little unfortunate in the fact that he's going to be able to swing with the Grim, get the mystery counters, and then immediately Judgment, killing my Phaley, which is too bad. But at the same time, I've still completely removed his hand. We're both playing handless, and at this point, and my board is much easier, and my Judgment actually gets me a creature potentially. So I'll take the damage in the air because I can't stop it. He's going to go ahead and pump it up with 0. So I'll go ahead and take the 10 damage. Go to 3,000, gets the mystery counters, pays the 2 to go ahead and do Judgment, which will then invert the Grim, and kind of to help him out, I'm just going to go ahead and flip it over there for him. He's going to use Grim's effect to kill Phaley. Phaley dies. I lose the 2 Blazer clones at the end of turn. Still perfectly fine. Because again, in the board state that I'm in, I still have Blazer, which is great. I'm going to be able to flip into Aimul, grab another creature. If I happen to grab into Phaley, then I'm just super lucky. I'm just ahead on card advantage purely because I also just get to draw a card. So, do Judgment here. Way ahead on will as well. I start to de-sleeve the Aimul. I haven't done the exchange program as of yet. Get the Aimul, look at the top 3 cards. See a Rachel. This Rachel is excellent because now I can make sure that whatever card he draws off the top of his deck is just pure garbage. But I actually decided to look at my cards because I'm hoping that maybe I can top deck into something. Now, I make an interesting play here. I don't actually have to do this at all because what Rachel says is you can actually just look at your deck, those top 3 cards, and arrange them in any order. However, I don't really care about Severing Winds at this point, right? Because he's only drawing 1 card per turn. And I don't really care about Fairer too much, I don't really care about Lowrite too much because the only card that really is relevant for that play would be something like the Grim, the Usurper of Maddening Power. So more, and even if that all happens, right, I still get, again, like I said before, he has to pay a lot of life to be able to deal with that, and then I'm still going to get to go draw a card, any card that I want, produce a ton of will in response, and then at the end of the turn, probably just flash in a Jupiter and kill him. So I'm not super concerned if he chooses to spend his entire turn trying to do that. He's going to play the Shade here, hits me in the air for 10 with the Grim because it's flying, and he says, why not? I don't have anything that can fly. Draw for turn. Go to recover. Attempt to swing the Aimul into Grim. The plan here being that I just want to try to get that 3 damage on it. He says that's fine. I get to gain 3 life, go up to 23. Like I said, it doesn't have imperishable because 0 was flipped, but I just want to get Aimul back onto that side so I can make use of cloning really fast. And being able to recover fairly easily enough. See, I have a Lorite in hand anyway. That's the other reason why I didn't care about the Lorite, is because I already have one. Attempt to swing the Rachel into the Grim to try to kill it. He's going to go ahead and block it with the Shade, not use the effective Shade, just try to block it with the Shade. Which is fair, because he knows that if he lets me go search for a card, he loses Grim, and I can go grab like a Jupiter or something crazy. Playing Kagi's Moonbeam Butterfly to go grab a 3-drop, which is going to be Phaley at this point, right? So here's the interesting thing about the Phaleys with Rachel clones, right? So if I clone a Rachel, when that clone dies, it actually is going to trigger Rachel's effect to let me go get any card that I want. So at this point in time, what I can essentially do is before he draws on his turn, I can clone a Rachel to top deck to make sure that the top deck card he's going to draw is non-instant speed, right? And then I can recover, let him draw the card, and then clone into Blazer, and then make it so that card that he's going to immediately gets to discard. So he literally is stuck with just what he has on field. So sure, he can hit me for a bunch of damage. 0 can't possibly attack. I'll take 10 damage in the air, it tops. The Blazer, the Rachel clone dies at end of turn. I can go grab a Jupiter, and then just let it go to my turn. Right, so I stack the top 3 cards of his deck. So this is kind of the soft lock that this deck likes to get to, where you get your opponent down to having 0 cards, and then you kind of just make it so that they can't ever play a card ever again. So whatever card they get, cards they have on the field when this soft lock happens is what they just get to keep forever. And then as you remove those cards from them, then they just can't play the game anymore. Recover, let him draw for his turn. I let him have a Flourishing Help, which having so many cards on field and having like a Rachel clone and a Sacred Elf, I'm just like, okay, if you really would like to cast it, that's fine. I don't really care at this point. It would essentially be 4 will wasted, because I'm not trying to kill his 0, right? And I don't have anything that flies, so I can't kill his Grib anyway. And he knows he can't swing with 0 because the Blazer will just be able to remove it from combat. So literally the most he can do at this point is deal 10 damage to me. And it's sitting at 23 life. I don't really care. At the end of the turn, the Rachel is going to go let me grab a Jupiter. And at which point in time, the lock is pretty much guaranteed. So yeah, this is kind of just what this deck is designed to do. Is just set up this lock where the combo just makes it so your opponent can't play, and then you just amass. Either you go for hitting them over and over the head with Blazer clones because they don't have any creatures on board. You set up the Jupiter OTK, or you can even just deck them out with Rachels. You can just make so many Rachel clones that you just deck your opponent out. Swings in the air for 10 because he's like, I guess I kind of have to. Puts me down to 13. kind of just looking at all his options, saying I don't really have much here to be able to do. Not really going to be able to do anything off of this. So he just passes the turn. So during the end of turn phase, I'm going to go ahead and clone the Blazer. He's going to respond by saying, I guess I'll make this my 0 not be able to be killed, so just so I can have it. Just mainly wanted the Blazers so that I can set up my attack next turn. The Rachel clone dies, I get to go grab a card. I don't have to reveal it. It is, of course, going to be Jupiter to kind of set up the lock. I also have, with Lorite in hand too. So if I happen to get Lorite, Rachel, whatever, he's going to say, okay, well, during the upkeep, I guess I'll go ahead and just cast this Burgeoning Despair, forcing you to sack some stuff. And I go, okay, I'll go ahead and sack a Sacred Elf because I don't need the Will at this point, and I'll sacrifice Melfi because I don't need the white at this point. Go ahead and go to recover, especially since I'm just going to call for Stone with Aimul. I have more than enough will at this point to be able to cast pretty much anything I need, as well as make multiple clones. Swing for 9 with the Blazer clone. He says that's fine. I'll go down to 11. Swing for 9 with the Blazer clone. Or 7 with Rachel. He says that's fine. I'll take it. Go down to 4. Swing for lethal with the Blazer clone. He says I'll block it with 0. I say that's fine. I literally could just attack him with both Phaley and Melfi here, but just to be kind of silly, I hit him with Melfi, take him down to 3. Take him down to 1. Pay 5. Hit him with play the Jupiter to be able to recover the Melfi and draw a card. Or I'll bounce the Grim back to his hand, recover, and then hit him in again with the Melfi for the end of the game. So there you have it. That is the match. Let me know what you guys think. This deck is super fun, and huge thanks to Josh for being willing to play against it. Huge thanks to Brandan Bremont for the list. Lists will be up later this week. I hope you guys enjoyed them. Let me know what you guys think about them, if this is something that you think you would play, or if you can kind of imagine what to do differently with this deck. And until next time, this is DMO73, signing off.
Huge thanks to the patrons of the channel. You see their names on the screen here, some of them, and the rest are down below in the description for their support of the channel and the content. If you want to get a chance to get your name in the screen here and access to our private Discord server, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon by clicking that little P on the screen. Thanks so much. See you next time.